anything that had a chemical substance also has a numerical sequence, and that numerical sequence is also a song. So music is not just something that people make, it's something that exists in nature. So one of the reasons why it's a divine language is because it's a perceivable feedback system that our entire physical reality is hitting on and off of each other. And this was what Pythagoras really put forward. Things in nature have music, and that you can use resonance and sympathy and sound in a mathematical way to match the numbers of the thing that you're interacting with, and that becomes a language.
It seems to me that the core belief of esotericism is the idea that the individual is connected to the cosmos. And that's why when we say as above, so below, the belief is that within the palm print of an individual, we're supposed to see replicated the whole of creation. Within the grid work detectable in a single leaf or a snail shell, we're supposed to see the coding of creation, whether it's the golden mean or whether it's a means of gestation by which life replicates itself. In the same vein, and this was an insight of Pythagoras and of Pythagoras' students, the world itself abounds with sound, and we're told in certain classical literature that it was sound or the word that served as the first ignition point of creation.
I have to believe there's enlightenment in every sound. I think when you're talking about that kind of harmoniousness, you're talking about your relationship with sound, or your consciousness, your awareness of sound, and kind of defining your relationship to it. It's like kind of all negative things in life. They can all be transmuted into something beautiful and affirming. But it's, most people just don't want to do that.
We literally are, everything is energy. So we literally are music.
Talking about it is like dancing about architecture.
Well, it's always interesting to note music's effect on the body, in oneself, and the degree to which music is quite literally an energizing force.
It's an aspect of the layers of divinity into physical manifestation, and then up through whatever it is that they precipitate into physical manifestation.
Musical training is a more potent instrument than any other in the integration of the human being, because rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul, on which they mightily fasten, imparting grace and making the soul who is rightly educated truly graceful.
I could speak about, the power of music healing through 2 points. First, the point of playing music myself, and then realizing the effect it would have on other people. So on myself, it was healing in the fact of I was the last one of 3 children, and growing up as a solitary child, because I was much younger, and when I would find myself a bit loner, solitary, and I would practice music and play, it would instantly put my thoughts at another place. From all my fears of being maybe alone, nostalgia of missing my brother and sister once they left home to do their studies, practicing myself put me in a state of mind where I would be in peace, soothed. Also, I would realize it would give me a certain power because I would be successful at it, and therefore whenever I would feel some anxiety of being in a group at school, then I would come back to my piano and I would feel empowered that I make my own music, and growing up that way. And then all these sounds from all the wonderful composers like Chopin, Mozart, and then feeding my soul and my heart, it would always act as a cathartic process for me. The steadiness of the beat creates something soothing in your body. I guess maybe taking you back on when being in the arms of your parents, and being swung.
I came to esotericism slowly, as far as acknowledging my relationship to it. I think it was always there very strongly. I even went so far as to kind of lean away from the arts and go into science, and studied speech and hearing science for several years and worked in the Veterans Hospital in Portland, Oregon. Ultimately, doing all those things to learn more about the nature of human hearing and kind of just probe that even deeper beyond music. It's more dealing with the trauma of sound, because you're dealing with war veterans who were wounded from the noises of war and having not just hearing damage, but traumatic brain injury and other things that affect their speech and kind of the sounds that they make. And that was fascinating because I worked directly with war veterans. I mean, we weren't doing healing practices through those studies. We were more kind of analyzing the trauma that was impacted on them. The impacts of sound go way beyond the ears. That was made very clear to me through that work. But just thinking about war and sound, I'm just immediately reminded that music therapy, as we know it in America, really arose through a connection with Theosophy and New Thought. There's these esoteric traditions of American metaphysics, and World War I and World War II, where the Red Cross started sending musical performers to soldiers in the field, and developed therapeutic music practices geared towards helping soldiers largely overcome the trauma when they got back from war.
Thinking about what sound is actually really crazy. But everything that is perceptual is going, this is just, we're in this dragon that's just going like this. So sound is part of that, and it's fluctuating on this wave, and the tighter you make it, right, like the smaller or larger that you make it, it's not only sound, but it also has a shape. This is the platonic solids, right? Those are also a sound. Each one of those have a way that it sounds, because why? Because the frequency of a sound is a number. And a number is also a shape. So if I have 3, it's not just the number 3, it also has a sound, and it's also a triangle. And it also has a color.
When we hear the crashing of a wave, or the sounding of thunder, or the crackling of lightning, or the sound of a running brook, or even the chirping of cicadas, we're hearing something that's an intrinsic reflection of life replicating itself, of the creation of a kind of stasis in which life can renew, in which the world as we know it can be generative. And music replicates that. In a sense, everything that we do replicates the gestation of nature. And it's no happenstance that within human beings we learn to talk, for example, before we learn to write. We learn to talk in a manner of speaking before we learn even to crawl or to use our bodies. You know, every newborn is able to cry to signal a need, but that same newborn cannot yet use his or her bodies, may not even yet have the full capacity of sight, but that newborn can hear, and that newborn can express through sound. So it's the primeval form of expression.
The early world is never still. All its noises flow together into an endless sound. 24 hours of the day, there is motion, and motion naturally leads to sound. The taxicabs, streetcars, subways, elevated trains, and the teeming industry of human beings mingle in a sea of sound in which we live and move and have our being. Consciously, we soon lose awareness of this endless hum, but in our subconscious, the rhythms are a powerful force in conditioning our lives.
My immediate inclination is to kind of reference it to what Jakob Burma calls like the supersensuality, something, an experience beyond the senses. This being kind of back into the recesses of our consciousness, where we're less informed by the phenomena outside us and more tapping into something interior. And that's also where sound, color, form, scent, all these different sense media from the outer phenomenal world still kind of operate or have some sort of kind of ghost in the mind, but they're able to fuse into one another, substitute one another, correspond with one another, inform one another.
The music of the spheres is a song of space, a sublime statement of the joy of the universe, all parts of which unite like the voices of an immense chorus. Here are the gods who dance, who write poems on stones, and sing the blossoming of flowers. Here's a world in which nothing actually is wrong. The song is there. The defect is in the ears of the listeners.
When I was very young, around 9 years old, my dad got me a guitar, and I didn't really play. I just was kind of like beating on it. And then my mom ended up pawning that guitar. And then when I was 12, my family had really started picking up a lot of instruments. Like my mom was playing piano and keys and singing, and my brother was playing bass and guitar, and he was like taking upright lessons, he was taking guitar lessons, and so it was around me. And I never took lessons, but I felt a yearning to do something. I knew I was meant to do something artistically. Acting was huge. I used to put on plays with my siblings, boss everybody around, like, you do this, you do that, you do that, and like
I've always liked making things. Since I was a little kid, you know, I always like spent hours playing with Legos, but when I played with Legos, I would always you know, never follow like the instructions on the box and build what was on the box. I just kind of make up my own spaceships and, you know, whatever.
For me, music as a young person was very much hedonistic, so we would just dance around like maniacs.
My earliest memories of music as being powerful are kind of unusual, but one is going through McDonald's and getting, they used to give out these like floppy vinyl records with the Happy Meal. And they had one of the Gremlins, which was a series that they were doing, this, you know, horror movie. And I was obsessed with it. And I would play the record in the back of the car and kind of whimper with fear, to the point where my mom would be, you know, like, Matt, it's okay if you want to turn it off. And I'd be like, no, but I like it. And it might seem like a weird example, but to me, that's like a great example of music providing this like safe space for anyone, even like a little boy, to explore their own emotions.
I come from a childhood of you know, a lot of love, simultaneously a lot of trauma, and music just became the thing that I was doing all the time, very naturally.
You know, I had like a lesson and learned a couple chords, and should have probably kept going to guitar lessons, but instead I took those chords and started like writing songs.
I started playing in a band with my brother. We were like playing pretty often, and in that time I was writing songs and drinking. I was drinking and lots of wine and just expressing myself a lot. I was not in school. I got pulled out of school when I was 12 years old, and I started doing music. So and I was like homeschooled, but I wasn't. So that's what I did with my time, really.
As far as kind of getting more actively involved in music, it was getting the guitar, seeing someone else I know play it. I was just like, oh, he can do that, then I can do that, you know?
Like the guitar is a very mysterious, expressive beast, and the piano just seems like laid out like as logically as you could possibly lay out an instrument. You know, everything's just right there. You just press the key and the sound that you want comes out. Whereas like guitar, you know, you can play the same note, but depending on if you're on this fret or this string, it's going to sound totally different.
I didn't want to do that band anymore. I felt like I wanted to do something more authentic to me. I wanted to do something less like heavy, and something where I could really it was just me and a guitar, really. And so I did that for a while. Around like 17 years old, 18 years old, I left the band, and I started to pursue more of my own thing.
Some of the earliest drawings I did when I was like 8 or 7 or so were like nested geometric shapes, circles within squares, within you know, and I don't really understand where that was coming from, but I've kind of come back to it over and over again. But it was in Portland around 2006 where I started kind of, as I was like, remember working as a secretary at the speech and hearing science department at Portland State University, I started drawing musicians in space and just kind of wanting to explore the spatialization of performers across the globe. So I started researching, like, you know, circular shapes were very common in Native American and African, and probably one of the more widely used geometric shapes of social geometry and music, and finding other shapes. And I just started exploring that with ensembles of kind of ad hoc musicians and community members in Portland. And so that just had me start thinking of music in terms of geometry on a regular basis.
I came out to Los Angeles, and it was like, that was really hard. I had to leave my little siblings that I raised. Pretty much, I raised my younger siblings, and my relationship ended, and I started couch surfing, and just I was a waitress also for like 12 years, so I was like serving tables, and then after that I would go play shows, and it just took me a while. It took me a few years to like figure out what I was doing.
Most of the, I hate to say this, it seems very cliche, but a lot of the songs that I've written have come out of hard times and hard experiences.
What happened to me was, I had a kind of a turning point in my life, and one where my kind of musical career wasn't being affirmed, and a reassessment of who I was at the same time. And so for me, music became, I found myself withdrawing from all forms of kind of career or social worlds of music. I still haven't performed with anyone or performed by myself in over a decade. At a certain point, music became a very personal religion for me, and I kind of became a hermit with it, and it's become a very private practice that I like to share recordings and documents of things, but I'm not a performer. And so that kind of separates me somewhat from the majority of musical expression.
Musicians and creatives have higher suicide rates than other people. So it's a really big deal. And that, I think, is attributed to management of that energy, right? When you're a creative person, you achieve states that some people will never know in their lives.
Looking back at my life and everything and like the whole path, I'm so stoked on it and like grateful for everything. Like not one thing that I regret, or it's all so beautiful in the end. But as I was going through it, really up until 2018, it was just total challenges, like so many challenges, and just so gnarly, and I was so like suicidal, my whole life suicidal, and drinking and on tour and sick all the time because I wasn't being taken care of properly, because I didn't know how to take care of myself. So how could anybody else take care of me properly when I'm not speaking up about it?
Writing songs in that kind of in those conditions in your life definitely acts as kind of a cathartic way of understanding and relating to what you're going through.
Then I just got like kind of just sucked into a undertow like there's a whirlwind of what looked, I think, from the outside to people like really amazing, and even the people around me were excited, and I was just totally lost and confused and knew I wanted to do music, but didn't feel like I was being, and was attempting to be as authentic as I could, but I was still compromising a lot of my, my artistry and creativity, and it was really this just, I don't know, it was a really challenging for me to like
Energetically, that's hard to manage because you're going from the tip of the peak to the underground in like 5 seconds. I know so many creatives who have difficulty managing that because you're in another realm when you approach that.
So I've become very, even more withdrawn and obsessive about my free time, being devoted to creative things and to my daily practice, which is rooted in these geometric shapes. And yeah, just, I mean, what I brought it over here just in case, but I meditate on one of these each day, and I choose them based on numerology in the calendar. And each one has 4 shapes that represent the 4 elements, and 3 pairs within each representing 3 different dream figures and dreams that I work with on a regular basis. I quit drinking and smoking using this daily meditation practice, and through drawing and music kind of being this dual force of expression of this meditative practice. And I mean, it saved me.
Going from writing and expressing myself and all of the pain, and kind of in this unconscious way, but it was still happening. You know, I was still channeling to some extent. And then having this like massive awakening, like literally overnight. It was like, I know it happens in layers, and it's an always like ever unfolding process, but for me, I was very much asleep, and I went from being asleep to just like seeing everything with a completely different perspective overnight, talking to my spirit guides. My chakras start opening up, like I'm like purging. I mean, I purged that for years, since that, just every day, because I'm just like releasing all of this stuff. So and so when I release, you know, all of this pain, before it was like I was just in this like loop of pain. And then when I had my awakening, it was like, okay, I don't need to, like, I can still feel it and release it and stuff, but like now I can actually release it so that I can bring in information. And bringing in information is like, you know, light.
To live without music is to die without peace. But to be enriched by its gentle persuasions is to find God and beauty everywhere.
I experienced before I went on stage so much fear and shadow, just like it felt like it was like whoo. And this is something that I get, you know, a lot of times in social situations. So I go on stage, and you know, and also I think it's just like, for me, it's just learning my sensitivities, and like I can only do so much, and learning how to say no, and really honoring my sensitivities and literally using them as a superpower. It is a gift.
The journey of the musician, it mirrors the yogi a lot. They basically tour like a musician. They don't stop moving. They do a lot of the same techniques, so I think it's comparable, and I don't think it's any mystery that musicians are able to obtain and precipitate. I love that word, precipitation, because it's like they go up, they connect to the muse, and then they come down, and then they are able to precipitate or distribute it to everybody else who can't do that. So it is like a church.
I got on stage and I was feeling a lot of fear, a lot of the shadow, and I went out there and I just was like, just let go, get out of my head, and I just went into the feeling of the music. And it was like I started doing this thing where I was almost like breaking out of a cocoon with my body, and that's what it felt like. I felt like I was being rebirthed on stage.
Later, music played a significant role in my spiritual practice. Specifically, I did techniques when I would achieve certain states of consciousness. I would purposefully play a song and make, I don't know if other people talk about this, but I would make what I call an anchor. So it would be imbued into the song, so that if I want to reach that state again, I have to play the song. So it's like a mnemonic device or a trigger. So I purposefully used music to create spiritual practice triggers, but it wasn't like I was triggered because of what the song was. Does that make sense? It was a little bit reversal, where I had the state and then I put it when I was there into a song, and it was very practical. I was able to induce the state every time I played the song. So, and it was funny because some of it I would be making art while I would be imbuing the song. And there was one, especially the artwork I was making, I noticed had the song imbued on it. And here's what happened. Somebody purchased one of the works of art, and they sent me a little video on their phone of them getting it framed. And in the frame shop, it was playing the song, which was crazy, right? This was like, they were across the country. They had no idea that I was listening to the song at the time. So the anchor worked very well and had been infused or imbued into that moment.
Witnessing, unfortunately, my dad going through a long and painful to witness illness. He had a heart attack and a stroke 10 years ago, and he lost gradually the use of speech. And what I realized is that when at the beginning he would be in real troubles finding his words, and that would be so painful to witness because he used to be a joyful, very talkative person, then he would still be able to take his clarinet or his saxophone, and he would play like always, like really beautifully in a virtuosistic way. And that was really when it struck me.
2, 3.
It was two different canals maybe in the brain, with which I later on researched. And yes, I learned that the speech goes through the left part of the brain, and when people have dementia or stroke, it's this part of the brain which is affected. But when you do music and sing a song, for example, it goes through the right side of the brain, meaning that it's another part of the brain. And by doing so, by triggering the music in someone who lost the use of the speech, it helps triggers memories and feelings, and all of a sudden unstuck few words that you wouldn't think the person would have before. And I witnessed it since the beginning of his illness until now, where my dad cannot speak at all. But when I sing to him some old songs that he grew up with, then all of a sudden his eyes really lighten up, and he can sing one word, the end of a word. He can even sing in pitch. And that's huge, and that's one way I'm bonding with him. Without something artistic, and we meet every day people who say, oh, music is not my thing, and you know, I think the mind, body and soul, I really believe, like just lack of compassion maybe, or lack of extra, it's hard for me to expand on that, but extra creativity on the way of thinking, you know, being able to see something into many different angles, you know. I think life would be just too flat, too pragmatic. Like music, that's what I wanted to say from the beginning, brings a part of irrationality, but in a positive way, you know, which we all need. And I believe, you know, instead of going, you know, through, you know, misbehaviors, drugs and anything, just do music, listen to music, and you'll have all the irrationality, the craziness, the passion that you think life is missing.
I think that's my favorite part about playing live now that I have had my, like, you know, my first massive awakening is the ability to close my eyes and tap in straight into source, plug straight into source, and see all the colors and all of the shapes and the magic.
I was thinking about my daughter, you know, who, like I mentioned, she's just like learned to walk in the last couple months. And even before she could walk or stand up, you know, when music would come on, her body would relax. She would listen to it. She's like lives completely in the moment, you know. There's no ego pulling the strings or whatever, you know. She is completely going wherever her intuition takes her. And when you put music on, it's different than all the other noises she hears through the day. And now she's big enough to stand, and we play music and she dances, you know. And the way that she moves is completely informed by a power that is beyond anyone, because no one showed her this is how you dance, you know, this is how you move your body when music comes on. It's like there's like an invisible hand guiding her movements in a way that's just incredible to see. It's to me speaks to the power that music has in like the deepest parts of our brain.
I ask myself, what would life be like without music? It's almost like asking, what would life be like without a sense of taste? Or what would life be like without a sense of smell or touch? I suspect that the human being would be very underdeveloped based upon what we know or what our expectations are today. because so much information and so much connection to other people is experienced through music. I mean, when you're at a concert of whatever type, you're participating in a kind of congregational event in which the music is having a remarkably similar effect on everybody, and it does form a kind of community.
I mean, to me, that's kind of a trick question, because life is music.
It would be a world without sunshine, but I think that human beings would be completely able to adapt to it. But what kind of a life would that be?
I guess there would need to be some sort of connection to source, right? Which would, maybe if everybody was meditating, it wouldn't be hell. Like, but that's probably the only way, or if everybody was just in nature all the time. I think nature or meditation, or, you know, but as long as there's, you know, the universe they're connected to the universe somehow. Otherwise, it definitely would be hell, you know?
And I suspect it would be a great deal more difficult for people to connect. It seems to me that in the same way that you can talk about the existence of some overmind or greater intelligence or infinite mind in which all of us take part, and can frame that in such a way that it forms a kind of connective field or a unified field to which all of us are plugged in, and it helps create human wholeness. Assuming that that's correct, or some variant of it is correct, I would venture that one could say the exact same thing about music and about sound, that it too forms a vibrational field, literally and measurably, in which we all participate and in which we all form one whole. Music is quite literally a measurable vibrational field in which we can empirically observe human beings plugging into or being receptive to, receiving a frequency and expressing a kind of wholeness.